Have you had one of your social media posts fact-checked recently? It's this interesting thing that all the media organizations are suddenly doing now. Whenever there's a piece of rogue information, information that doesn't conform to the approved narrative, it gets fact-checked. For example, a few weeks ago during a Kayleigh McNamee news conference, Neil Cavuto interrupted her and fact-checked her. What he said completely astounded me. But first, as always, we start with our mission.
With firm faith, I believe and profess everything that the Catholic Church teaches. But for many reasons, the fullness of that message hasn't been getting out lately. What if we, together, set out to learn the faith, to live the faith, and to share this faith, like missionaries of old? What would the world look like in 100 years?
I am literally asking for this video to be fact-checked because typically I talk about things that I have some background in, some kind of expertise, theological issues, religion, etc. But not this video. This video is going to focus heavily on statistics and probability, and I am not a statistician. I barely made it through high school math. So think of this as a giant thought experiment, and all of the data that I quote in this video, I figured out with this old calculator. With all that said, I'm honestly hoping that this video gets fact-checked because I don't want to spread misinformation. So regular viewers might have noticed that I kind of disappeared for a couple of weeks. Some of you actually reached out to me asking if I was okay. Thank you for reaching out. Everything was okay. But I was honestly hung up on this. I could not get this out of my head. And not being a statistician, I was hesitating to make this video. But every time I sat here and tried to make another video, all I could think of was this. So here it is. Here's this video that I am not qualified to make, and hopefully some of you are and can honestly fact check me in the comments below. What it is that I'm trying to communicate, I'm going to use this old calculator, a coin, dice, and an old deck of cards. Now, to make my point here, this video will unfortunately focus heavily on Neil Cavuto. Why Neil Cavuto? Honestly, because I think Neil was the last reporter that I liked, the last reporter that I trusted. And it would be too easy for me to use CNN or MSNBC as examples here because those outfits look more like SNL caricatures of news organizations than actual news organizations. So to use CNN really wouldn't help me make my point here. Now, during a press conference regarding all of this controversy, while Kayleigh McNamee was making her introductory remarks, Neil Cavuto decided to interrupt the video feed to prevent his audience from hearing her make her full case. He cut her off saying, "I just think we need to be perfectly clear. She's charging that the other side is welcoming fraud and welcoming illegal voting," which she actually said nothing of the sort. Go back and watch the tape. Continuing, "Unless she has more details to back that up, in good conscience, I cannot continue showing you this." I'm not going to lie, I had to look that word up. But allow me to remind you that this was her opening remarks. She actually had many more things to say that the viewers of Newsmax actually got to hear. To be charitable to Neil, perhaps he did not know that she was about to present her evidence. But for me to embrace that idea would be to suspend what little intelligence I have. You might call it an intellectual lockdown. Allow me to explain. This is Common Core Standard ELA-literacy.w.5.1, which states, write opinion pieces on topics or texts supporting a point of view with reasons and information. It's a 5th grade standard, and different forms of this standard exist at different grade levels. However, I picked the 5th grade version intentionally because I wanted to make a point. Because Neil, all 10-year-olds in America are supposed to know this. And while the Common Core standards did not exist when you and I were in school, this standard did. It is the standard for persuasive writing. Now, a 5th grader might use a graphic organizer like this to fulfill this standard. And for the benefit of all the non-10-year-olds in the audience, that first box is where you introduce your argument. Common Core Substandard 5.1.a, introduce a topic, what Kaylee McNamee was doing when you interrupted her. Now, the second, third, and fourth boxes are where 10-year-olds would provide the evidence to prove their argument. That is Common Core Standard 5.1.b, provide logically ordered reasons that are supported by facts and details. Your audience did not get to hear that part of Kaylee McNamee's presentation. However, Newsmax's did. Now, to pretend as if you did not know that that is how persuasive speaking works would be to ask your audience to forget that we have spent the last 20 plus years watching you daily engage in this very activity. In other words, it would be to ask us to commit an intellectual lockdown, because every single day you come on the air, you introduce your topic, and only then do you present factual evidence to try and persuade your audience of your position. As a matter of fact, I have never seen you first present your evidence and then afterwards present your introductory remarks. Additionally, after you engage in this process, we have watched you for decades proceed to interview guests who go through the exact same process: introduction, then evidence. We, your viewers, have witnessed you performing this task hundreds, if not thousands of times. So for you to interrupt Kaylee McNamee while she was in the process of Common Core Substandard A without giving her the opportunity to get to Substandard B, all under the guise of her not having any evidence, is highly questionable on your part, because we all know the evidence would be presented only after the introduction. Now, your viewers, who have trusted you for the last 20 or so years, have a right to ask the question, why did you cut her off claiming she had no evidence while she was introducing her evidence? Now, I'm aware that this was early on, and at the time, there was truthfully very little evidence available. But Neil, even that early on, there was this. This existed. Anyone who has ever rolled dice or flipped a coin knows by looking at that there's something wrong with that. That itself is evidence, because that, as I hope to demonstrate, if I do not prematurely get cut off, that does not happen in the real world. And no matter what side of the aisle you are on, when you see that, that should evoke some concern in you. You should have some questions, some curiosity, like, hey, that's weird. I wonder how that happened. But it seems as though some people just don't want to ask that question. Maybe they don't want people to look too closely, because that just doesn't happen in the real world. Like you can't reproduce that by flipping a coin or rolling dice. For example, if I flip a coin, regardless of the last flip, regardless of the next flip, this flip has a 50-50 chance of getting either heads or tails. That data shows thousands of flips landing consecutively on heads. But probability dictates that of 1,000 flips, there would be about 500 heads and about 500 tails, which means that's impossible. But Brad, that was a blue county. Yes, I know. So instead of flipping a coin, let's roll dice. And let's give an inordinate advantage to blue. Let's give it a 5-to-1 ratio. Numbers 1 through 5 are blue. Number 6 is red. To recreate that data, I would have to roll this dice thousands of times and not once land on a 6, even though with every single individual roll, there is a 16.7% chance that I will. But that data shows a 0% chance of landing on a 6, which according to my little calculator here, has the probability of 1 in 15 followed by 77 zeros which I think is actually larger, but I only have 77 spots on this calculator, which can only mean that either a miracle occurred multiple consecutive times, or that the dice that was used to create that data did not have a 6 on it. Again, the dice that was used to create that data could not have rolled a red. Now, in a free and public election, I can't think of any way that would be legal. To go even further, even if the tickets were pre-sorted before they were scanned, like if I take all of the red cards and put them here, and I take all of the blue cards and I put them here, and then I go and scan them, even in that case, you would still have to rule out any possibility of human error in the sorting for that to actually occur. And the more tickets and the more ticket sorters, the greater the possibility of error. But we don't see any possibility of error in that data. So we must believe that the ticket sorters were immaculately conceived. Are we calling this the immaculate election? That still would not explain the data, because if all the tickets were pre-sorted without any error, and blue tickets were then scanned, as we see in the graph, then what happened to the red tickets? Why don't we see those in the graph? I can't think of an answer to that question that's not a felony. Can you? So then that is evidence. I don't know what it's evidence of. I don't know. But it is clearly evidence of something. And I would think that a seasoned reporter working for one of the largest news corporations in the world might have some legitimate questions about that. But instead, you and your colleagues continue to ignore that and pretend as if that is not a legitimate question. Neil, are you aware that someone actually submitted that data? That data was actually certified? But the claim on the table is that that is impossible, that it cannot exist in the real world. So on the table is a legitimate question, one that your viewers have. So when Kayleigh McNamee opens a news conference, many of us were waiting for some explanation of that. But you cut her off, leaving the legitimate question hanging out there in midair. And we were just wondering why. Again, this is not CNN. If this happened on CNN, we would never even wonder. But it didn't. So we are. It seems as though one might want to have experts and statisticians on your show to interview them and ask, is that even possible? Just explain it to me. We don't need to argue. We don't need to take sides. We don't need to get political. Just explain it. Bring in the experts. I am not one. I started with that. Let them explain it. First we do this, then we do that, then we do this, and that's why it looks like that. Oh, okay. Now I understand. But until you explain it, the only thing that I can think of that might explain that is, well, you know, just what we later saw on that camera footage. You know, the footage with 4 separate angles, the one that the fact checkers said that we didn't actually see. That's exactly what that looks like to me. Why am I here pointing this out? I'm not a reporter. I'm not a statistician. I'm a high school dropout. But I've rolled dice before and I flipped a coin before. I used to play fantasy baseball. And I'm pretty sure that that is impossible. Here's my question for the so-called news reporters. Why does it seem as though news is not actually based on facts, but instead on political agendas? Why are the terms facts and fact checkers thrown around so loosely? Is it because those who control information, who control facts, think that they can control reality also? That they can direct the future of political thought? Back when we were in school, we had a name for that, for the manipulation of information to control the masses. Unfortunately, I can't say that word here without getting fact checked, but I think you know what word I'm referring to. I've got an idea. How about a t-shirt? intellectual lockdown, or the immaculate election. I like that. If I can work it out, I'll put a link down there. We still hold these truths to be self-evident. And now we acknowledge that you don't. That means we remain the United States and you do not. Because whether or not that has been defined legally as of yet, it's already self-evident.